Hey friends, so something funny that I have noticed about people, sometimes when you have a falling out with them, and specifically when they wrong you and they know they did, they will sometimes convince themselves that you are 24/7 focused on them and whatever happened between you, and so everything you do, good, bad, or otherwise, has something to do with them. This is especially true when you have effectively cut off their access to you, so to speak, so they really don't know what's going on in your life. They just make assumptions, or they go by what they hear from other people or see on social media or whatever. You know the kind of people I mean. The kind who read into everything you do thinking that it's somehow about them. If you level up in some way, it's to try to make them jealous. If you post something, it's about them. If you went out and took a cute picture of yourself and posted it, they think you did it to make them mad, and so on. And yes, there really are some people who are like this, who really do think that everything revolves around them in some way. And they're adults even. You'd be surprised. Anyway, there's a name for this. Besides ridiculous, I mean, it's called having a guilty conscience. And a guilty conscience will make a person do some strange things sometimes. It makes you a little bit like the narrator in The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, thinking that you hear a heart beating through the floorboards that is going to implicate you in a crime that you actually did commit, but that the police might not have found out about unless your guilty conscience hadn't basically handed them the whole case, saving the district attorney of wherever that story happened a pile of work. But anyway, I digress. That's the thing with a guilty conscience, isn't it? You think everyone knows what you did, that everyone is talking about it or thinking about it, even though they probably aren't. The guilt can go deep, too, into a person's subconscious, and many times it will try to sort of absolve itself by attempting to somehow rationalize what they did, sort of like, okay, well, I did this person dirty, but they did this other thing, and so they deserved it, right? Right? Or my personal favorite, when someone does you dirty and then works very hard to pretend that it's you that's the bad person so that they can feel better about what happened. I've seen some people be super committed to this. So the reason that people get the way they get and often misinterpret things to be about them, even when they aren't, is because that thing triggered their guilt. It becomes a voice in their ear, which is happy to remind them that they did something they shouldn't have. It becomes sort of like holding up a mirror to that person and making them look at a reflection that they don't particularly like. Because, hey, most people don't like being reminded when they hurt someone else or that they acted in a way that was unkind or unfair. So they get mad at the mirror and put all the blame there instead of putting it where it actually belongs, on the reflection, on themselves. And look, to give those people just a little bit of credit, it is hard to admit sometimes that you did something, or perhaps several somethings, that caused another human being pain. Even the toughest people you know have felt guilt or remorse when they have hurt another person, even when it was unintentionally. I like to think that most people don't hurt other people on purpose. I mean, unless they have a psychotic disorder or something. But the sad fact is that it happens. And when it does, the right thing to do is accept responsibility, make amends when you can, and try to repair your relationship with that person. That last part is important, especially the trying part. I think most people are forgiving in nature when they see that someone is truly sorry. I know I am. And they are generally willing to give that person another chance. I know I personally almost always will, unless it's just such a large betrayal that it permanently changes my opinion and level of trust in that person. Whether or not the person was honest about what happened and why it happened, and their willingness to take responsibility for that, is a huge factor in reconnection, at least for me. That last part, the taking responsibility, is a huge part of having personal accountability. You can never truly have that until you are willing to admit your mistakes and face them. Until you are willing to understand that sometimes your actions hurt other people. Until you are willing to say, this happened and I am sorry, I've learned from it, and I'll do better next time. And look, if guilt comes around and smacks you in the face in the meantime, if something that that person says or does triggers that guilt in you, even unintentionally, well then, to put it rather bluntly, if that shoe fits, you put that shit on and wear it. Some people cannot get there, to personal accountability, I mean. They will not admit that they did some things that were selfish or hurtful or just plain wrong, even if they're fully aware of what they did and the impact of it. Even if they feel guilt about it, and even if they aren't talking about that guilt or admitting it to anyone, including themselves. Even if the only time that they feel it is when they're reminded of that bad act, so to speak. Guilt is funny that way. It can definitely come even if you don't want it to, even if you think you shouldn't feel it, even if you have created 335 reasons in your mind why what you did was justified, even when it wasn't. And look, sometimes you do something that you feel bad about, and you have tried to smooth things over, you've apologized, and the other person is still hurt or upset by it. With all due respect, you can't get mad about that. Just because you're tired of feeling guilty does not mean that the other person needs to let it go or get over it, etc. They're going to do that when they're ready, and that's pretty much all I'll say in this video about that. A few weeks ago, we did a video called Intent is Not the Same Thing as Impact, and that goes into that subject at length if you want more information about this. Anyway, people like mirrors. Everyone has at least one in their home, right? But they tend to only like mirrors that are complementary to their appearance. But the thing is that with a mirror, it holds no preconceived notions about anyone or anything. It has no bias, no agenda. It really only has one job, and that's to simply reflect an image back to the viewer. So if you're looking in a mirror and you don't like what you see, whose fault is that? The mirror's or yours? And we can't talk about this subject without saying this. Do people do passive-aggressive things sometimes to try to get a message across that they just don't want to tell someone outright? Sure. Some people do. Is there something inherently wrong with that? The jury's out on that one. It's not my personal style. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't do passive-aggressive. If I have something to say, I'm just going to tell you. I may not do so on my own. Like, I'm probably not going to, call you and tell you, hey, you're an a-hole for what you did. But if you ask me, I'm going to be honest. And I'm going to do that even when other people ask me about it as well. I'm not going to make excuses for anyone or cover for them. For that, you would have had to catch me like 20, 25 years ago when I had, as one of my favorite Spanish idioms says, más pelo en la lengua, or more hair on my tongue. I'm 50, with 51 coming up at the end of this month. I'm dangerously approaching old lady who says whatever is on her mind territory. But getting back to the point, some people aren't comfortable with being that direct. That's okay. Everyone communicates differently. I personally don't think that being passive-aggressive is a great way to speak your mind, because there's a very good chance that the person you're trying to say something to won't get it or care. Speaking of caring, I saw a meme a long time ago that made me chuckle. It said, if you're posting stuff to make someone mad, please make sure that they care first. And it pretty much perfectly illustrates the next point I'd like to make. As people, I think we spend way too much time worrying about what other people think about us, when in reality, they actually do not care nearly as much as we think they do. They're worried about themselves, as, well, they should be. But when you're feeling guilty about someone, you absolutely don't see it that way. If something they say or do or post triggers you, I hate to be the one to tell you, but that's not at all on them. That's on you to figure out why it bothers you so much. And chances are that whatever they did, which is probably not about you, is showing you a reflection of mistakes or flaws or indiscretions that you don't want to think about. There's that guilty conscience again. And when that starts to make noise, friends, the question you should be asking is not, is this about me? It should be, why do I think this is about me? What kind of guilt am I harboring that I think that? What did I do to this person or to somebody else that is making me feel like that's got my name on it, even when it doesn't? People don't really like that last set of questions because, again, it requires introspection and honesty with yourself and embracing accountability. Those are difficult things to deal with, especially when you're being honest with yourself, because that requires you to admit sometimes that you were a shitty person to somebody else. That's why them pointing something out, even when it's not directly about you, is so wildly uncomfortable. Friends, one of the things that I believe we do often, and most of the time without realizing, is hold others to a standard that we impose on ourselves. In other words, what annoys you and you hate most about other people is what you actually hate most in yourself. When someone is holding up a mirror and it bothers you enough to think that it's all about you, even when it's not, you need to pay attention to that thing that the reflection is trying to show you. It is very often that the things that bother us the most are what end up teaching us the most valuable lessons and what give us the greatest understanding of ourselves. So like the message says, when a mirror shows you something you don't like, something you're not proud of that you did, something that you regret, something that you feel guilty about, stop getting upset at the mirror. It's not the mirror's fault. It's only showing you what you show it. Instead, work on the reflection. Fix things. Apologize. Make amends. Salvage connections. Be humble. All of those things are so very important to having personal accountability. There is no better way to learn from your mistakes and not repeat them than by having that. That's all I've got for you this week. I'll be back next week with another priority message. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Bye.